valóság mégis abban van valami emberi, nem? Tehát most persze
So now we are of course talking about Brussels, which is not very human, but the word boorishness still has something human about it. And it's a good word, by the way. It encompasses many things. One of its meanings is that you are not considerate of others. This is boorishness, isn't it? When you do something you think is good for you, but you don't care about what happens to others. And I'm sure I could find arguments about the well-considered aspects behind the Brussels decision, but it's certain that our perspectives are not included among them. So the impact on us as a result of their decision, that is, the inability to import Russian oil and gas into Europe, and thus into Hungary as well, which may not seem like a big problem from France's perspective. But what about us, for whom this is a matter of life, or at least families? The wallet, and the success of businesses depends on this. Is there any, or at what price is there? So if someone does not consider for example, President Trump did not make this mistake. Because he also made a sanctions decision. History will decide whether that decision was good or not. But when we told him, Mr. President, this is killing us. Obviously, you didn't make this decision to harm the Hungarians, but it is killing us. So give us an exception. He said, I understand, and he gave one. So that's fine. In Brussels, even if I say, give us an exception because I say this, and since unanimity is required for sanctions, so far, if it wasn't given voluntarily, I took it with a veto. There is the official European Union position that by 2030 the European Union must be ready for war. A war to be waged on Russia. They are building a war economy. A war economy is not built for 2 months. They are converting vehicle production to weapons manufacturing, to the production of armored equipment. I could list more examples. There is also a science for examining pre-war periods. This is something that social scientists study, and I read these, and according to the classical understanding, war or war expansion has 4 stages. The first is when diplomatic relations are severed. This has happened. The second is when economic sanctions are imposed, and economic cooperation is cut off. We are past this stage as well. The third is when conscription and the transition to a wartime economy come into play. This is where we are now. This is where Brussels is. And the fourth is the stage of conflict. So, we hold anti-war rallies for a reason. It's not called that because we couldn't think of a better name, but because this is the danger. Now for Hungary to achieve that Europe stays out of the war, this is a task that needs to be worked on, but we must be aware that it is beyond our strength. The weak are always dragged into war. Therefore, we must seize every opportunity to make Hungary strong. Economically, politically, in terms of sovereignty, we need to be strong. I could also say, I don't want to steer the conversation, into an electoral logic, but I could also say that the 2026 election, which awaits us in April, will be the last election before the war. The kind of government we have in 2026 will have to fight for Hungary and rescue Hungary from a war threat that is very likely approaching us. The kind of government we have in 2026 will determine our fate concerning the war. If we have a pro-Brussels government, they will drag us into the war. If not pro-Brussels, but national government, then we have a chance, because there is still an opportunity, a chance to stay out of it. So thinking ahead is important, but also in international politics. I do not hide it. At most I cannot reveal every detail, but I am negotiating with the Americans about what kind of economic cooperation there should be between Hungary and America after the war. And I am also negotiating with the Russians about the prospect that if the entire sanctions system is lifted, because it will not always stay this way, and they do not want to cut Russia out of the Western world economy, but rather want to trade and establish economic relations with it again, then it will be necessary at the right pace and effectively, how we Hungarians can benefit from this. Hungary can only rely on itself. And if we don't do it right, we could find ourselves in a situation where everyone is our enemy, instead of being our friends. So what I want to say is that the devastation of war is inscribed much more deeply in the soul of the Hungarian people, and it operates much more deeply in our instincts, than in the instincts of many Western European politicians. This is why, what is obvious to us that war can only be bad, is not thought of in the same way in the West. For example, they think that money can be made from it. And increasingly, money is taking over the power in this matter. Just look, and pay attention to the coming week. There is more and more talk about what will happen with the 200 to 230 billion euros of frozen Russian assets on the table. Until now, this has been a shame, it has been there all along. About this, so shyly they didn't even talk about it. But now they speak openly about it. Because if the Russians and the Americans come to an agreement, that money will be taken off the table. It is hard to imagine that one of the world's best-trained presidents, in terms of service, is on the Russian side. Here one of the world's best-trained, the American president, would leave a significant amount of money on the table. It's hard to imagine. But the Europeans thought that this would be the money they would acquire. And of course, this money will be given to Ukraine. But what will the Ukrainians spend it on? Well, part of it we read about news that the Ukrainians have made an agreement with the French to purchase 100 fighter jets, and we will increase with the Germans. Here a lot of major weapon deals are taking place, where the beneficiaries are ultimately Western European countries, and after a certain circulation, this money arrives to them. And we are increasingly deeper in the war, the economic lords of war. The warlords have a stronger influence on decision-making. This is such a deep, at first glance a technical text, but this is a thought revealing deep connections, worth spending some time contemplating. I only bring it up so that those who doubt that there are serious and threatening processes in Europe going in the wrong direction are unfolding, and they think that Hungary should stray onto the Brussels path, and only the foolish civic right-wing national Christian government doesn't see this obvious fact. I wanted to cite this for those people, not necessarily those sitting here, that people, it's not just it's us saying there's a problem. Europe is our greatest ally, and it says exactly the same about Europe's troubles as we do. That's why everything we say and notice, we should take seriously for ourselves, and draw the appropriate conclusion from it. Going back to the bombing of Budapest, we can only rely on ourselves. We must remain independent. We must remain sovereign. This is not just a matter of honor, not just a matter of self-respect, but it is also an economic issue.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the US will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.